All right, Tashilak. My name is Damian Sirso. I'm a half Tibetan, half Polish. I was born in Poland. I've lived here in UK and London for the last 15 years or so. And today I'm speaking about the Voluntary Tibetan Advocacy Group, otherwise known as VTAG. And this is basically an initiative that has been set up by the CTA, including the Sikyong, and the point of it is essentially to provide a platform for all Tibetans, regardless of their, their occupations, their age, etc., to basically come together and work on advocacy projects. Now, I have actually came across VTAG as part of the International Tibetan Youth Forum, which was held in 2023 in Dharamsala. And basically what the forum was about was it brought over 100 participants from all around the world, all Tibetans, together in this one place at the hotel, and had a lot of speakers come in, some political prisoners as well from Tibet come in, and essentially what it was is it was a discussion on the the advocacy landscape, the activism landscape, giving some insights into the history of Tibet, into the current situation in Tibet, especially first-hand accounts, which were really quite motivational as well. And that was actually the moment that has inspired me to work on this VTAG project, which I did not know about before this. So essentially, what really kind of stood out to me was the fact that all of these people got together, hundreds of people. A lot of them, most of them were really professionals as well. They've had their careers in all sorts of different industries. The finance folks, the software developer folks, event coordinators, for example, right? And so there was a lot of diversity, perspective, and most youth as well. So there was a lot of energy, a lot of good vibes and focus on what could be done for the Tibetan cause, especially when it comes to the future of the Tibetan cause, including obviously some of the politics, and so my involvement in this at the time was just a participant, and I got to know a lot of folks. And one of the things that actually stood out to me, which really inspired me to pursue work in advocacy, voluntary as it may be, was a showing of a documentary by Stories of Tibet in Dharamsala. It was just in a small cafe. There was about 20 or so folks, Tibetans, non-Tibetans alike as well. And what it was it gave the account of what is really happening in Tibet, right? But mind you, this was 15 years ago. Nowadays the situation is much more tougher, right? You don't get as many first-hand accounts of the actual situation in Tibet. But it basically reminded me that as a Tibetan, we should be taking on that responsibility of giving a voice to the people who can't do it themselves, right, under the illegal occupation of the Chinese Communist Party in Tibet and the tyranny that basically they hold over people, not being able to even hang up a portrait of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, speak his name, or raise any form of opposition against the CCP, mentions of Tibet, free Tibet, etc., right? So that kind of struck me quite deeply, and I thought to myself, that was the kind of turning point for me. This is, this is something I have to pursue, right? And then, I came back to the UK and, took away quite a lot of lessons from this forum with these hundreds or so participants, and under the guidance of the Department of International Relations, the department under the CTA, the Central Tibetan Administration, and also the Office of Tibet here in London. We got together, we started meeting with some of these other, Tibetan groups here in the UK, including Tibetan Community Britain, TCB, SFT UK, we had, International Tibet Network as well. We all got together and we kind of started discussing, this is what VTAG is, we're planning to do, etc. And so for VTAG, at its core, well, what it's about is it's about advocating for Tibetan, human rights, right? The situation that is going on in Tibet, right? And also advocating for the right for Tibetans of self-determination, right? Living, whether it is under the Chinese jurisdiction, so to speak, or whether it is, free, it is up to them, essentially, right? not much focus in terms of the political side of things. It's more about unity between Tibetans, right? And working together to make sure that Tibet stays relevant and that we reach our goal of eventually, having a free Tibet and, our people having the right to choose and having the rights of the common folks, basically, right? Those who are not under a tyranny, basically, right? Those who live in a democracy. But the main kind of focus that we have is twofold. One is on the Tibetan youth, right? And the idea is we want to nurture youth leadership to take over this advocacy, this activism stage, right? So it's the passing on of the leadership baton from the seniors, the people who did the work, right, the laid the foundations, onto us, the youngers who basically have studied. They have got all of these degrees. They're beginning to get some influence in the Western side of the world. How can we best make use of those skills to advocate for Tibet, essentially? And so with that comes training, right? With that comes practice, right, under the guidance of our seniors. And the second one is also a focus on increasing collaboration between Tibetan groups. So earlier I mentioned, as soon as we got back, we straight away got in touch with, TCB, SFT, the International Tibet Network, right? All of these groups, and we started thinking, how can we work best together, right? Now, V-TAG is kind of early, it's in its infancy. So it's a lot of folks basically coming together. We've got about 15 to 20 or so members here in the UK, and I'm the UK regional coordinator. So basically what we do is we coordinate these activities, right? We get everybody together, identify what kind of projects we can be pursuing, with whom to work with, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, how do we fit into this whole basically advocacy landscape and so on. And that's what we try to do, right? So we're trying to learn from these folk like SFT, for example, who has been in the picture, right, in the headlines for how many years, like 15 or so years, right? They do great work. And so what can we learn from them? Well, what are the key takeaways and how can we build off on that, right? So again, to emphasize, V-TAG, we're looking for members naturally, right? We need as much support as possible, more hands-on, the better. But it's not, it's not exclusive to any, be it groups, organizations, anything like that. It's essentially, if you are interested in doing some work, then, feel free to come to us and let's see what we can do, right? And, some of the things that you can kind of expect, or maybe some of the things that we have worked on so far that are quite notable is like the Global Advocacy campaign that some of you may have seen. Which was on December 10th on Human Rights Day, in which we've collaborated with ITN among with other groups as well to push for the Universal Periodic Review, Chinese Universal Periodic Review earlier in January this year, right? And the idea is basically, we're creating as much engagement, getting as many viewers as possible on the fact that China is going through this UPR process. And so what we try to do is get the public aware of this process and get their signatures so that we have more influence over, the MPs, right, the foreign officials who can make basically recommendations to China at this process and recommending China on how they can best tackle human rights issues within Tibet. And that was quite a big success. We had about 20 countries which have raised Tibet as an issue, up from 12 in 2018. So, this collaboration, and this is something that the other groups are starting to get attention on as well, is really a key component of making advocacy effective. And then among that, I mentioned the youth focus. So some of the things that we will be focusing over for the next year or so is establishing trainings on, leadership, on things like advocacy, public speaking, marketing. How can we run social media to get as much attention on the Tibet issue as possible? And some things that can come to mind is we've worked with SFT before on the difference between advocacy and activism and how can you do best for both. How does SFT approach those things? What are the key takeaways, right? And actually we've got another workshop happening today which is on public speaking in preparation for the March 10th Uprising Day, where we are hoping to get some youth to speak up about the situation in Tibet. What is the meaning of the March 10th Uprising Day, right? Why it is important, you know? So these are the kinds of things you can expect from us going forward. So obviously these are, whether you are interested in learning, feel free to participate. Whether you are interested in leading and, you know, running some of these projects, also you can feel free to reach out and join us as volunteer members. And yeah, so I mentioned the lobby week, or I mentioned March 10th Uprising Day, right? What we have come up with in collaboration with TCB, SFT-UK, Tibetan Action Institute, all of these groups is the lobby week, in which we can expect to get in touch with the MPs, so that is the youth getting in touch with the MPs, to have an understanding of how can the youth best contribute to this political side of things here in the UK, right? So how can we best encourage activism and advocacy, right? Pro-Tibet kind of approaches within the parliament itself, right? And then alongside that is going to be, again, some social media campaigns to raise awareness around this topic of the March 10th Uprising Day, as well as obviously the protest on March 10th, and a follow-up workshop on, you know, getting the youth involved in creating slogans, creating the materials for the actual protest itself, with some, you know, idea generation, perhaps some things like the political theatre, etc., as well as some touch points on how to best speak, essentially, right? Practicing the speech in front of an audience, etc. So these are things that you can expect coming for this week. So please do join us. Feel free to reach out. If you reach out to any group that I mentioned, that's Tibetan Community Britain, SFT UK, V-TAG, and then obviously and Free Tibet as well, then obviously, you know, they'll get through to us and we can, you know, figure out how you can best contribute to what we're trying to do. And that's it from me. So from our side, what we would really hope for you as the audience to do is to sign up as a V-TAG member, right? So this is a voluntary thing, and naturally, as soon as you sign up, what we will do is we'll reach out to you and have a discussion on what you think are the strengths, what you think are your weaknesses, and how you feel you could best contribute to the cause, right? So we'll help you with that, we'll guide you with that, as well as all the different projects, the different campaigns that these different groups are working on, right? To best allocate, obviously, your time to these projects. And the way you can reach out to us is, you know, you can find us on social media. And we've got a website that's going to be coming out soon as well, shortly after this interview. So around February 22nd, and the website is v-tag, that's TAG.net. So if you go on there, there should be instructions on how you can sign up as a member. And also a way to reach out to us as well if you have any questions. The visit to Dharamsala was very important to me, and it was something I decided on while I was working here in the UK. You know, I was actually going through a little bit of like a burnout from a lot of work that I was doing beforehand in a laboratory in Sussex. And I thought to myself, you know, if I'm going to take a rest, let me, you know, do something alongside with that rest. And so what we decided to do is actually go to Sara College, right, in Dharamsala. And I spent just under 3 months there, and I was studying Tibetan. So now I can read. I'm working on my vocabulary so that I can actually, you know, learn to speak it properly. And it was really quite an important event for me, because I met a lot of folks who are doing work for the Tibetan community there in Dharamsala. You know, Tibetans and non-Tibetans, some of whom I'm actually doing some work with right now as well. But also it gave me perspective on what the situation is like for the Tibetans there as well, some of the challenges that are currently being faced. So if you look at the CTA's, for example, vision paper, they talk about things like, you know, improving more on the digital side, right, seeking more kind of like job opportunities for Tibetans, or like the difficulty for artists, Tibetan artists to, you know, find jobs, or like, you know, sell their pieces and so on. So a lot of like challenges on those sides which have opened my eyes, and obviously these are places where we can contribute some of our time to help solve these challenges. But yeah, for me personally, I got more of a view in that side, and which is one of the reasons why actually VTAG also focuses a little bit more on the digital side of things, right? We feel like things could be improved for the Tibetan community as a whole, but also for the advocacy landscape, with more expertise in more technical subjects like search engine optimization, or like social media, use of social media, concepts like marketing. How can we make use of that, right? So that's opened up my eyes, and I've realized that a lot of the youngsters, especially in the TCV, right, the Tibetan Children's Village, the schools there, I feel like the choices in education within these kinds of subjects is more limited naturally compared to the Western side. So there's a lot of work that can be done there, and obviously these are points that I feel like if we address, is good for the community as a whole, but also for the advocacy landscape as well, like I mentioned. So yeah, very an eye-opening experience. I 100% recommend going to Dharamsala. It's a good experience. You've got the Gorshe every week on Wednesdays that you can participate in. So that kind of brings back you to your community. But also again, if you go around like to the TCV, if you go to like the libraries there, to the monasteries and stuff, all of this really connects you back to your roots. And yeah, you get to speak to a lot of folks who can really expand on your perspective on things. Also go to Sara College for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to learn Tibetan properly, or want to brush up on your skills. A lot of folks that you can learn from over there, great teachers. The place is absolutely beautiful. Dharamsala overall is absolutely beautiful. So yeah, I'm not promoting, I'm not being paid by anybody in the house. Definitely an excellent experience, highly recommend. But yeah, so this is Damian, again, representing Voluntary Tibetan Advocacy Group. I really hope you guys get in touch. The more hands we have on board, the better, the more work we can do for the Tibetan movement. Thank you so much. Pogelo.